And good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the Writer's Stream. And as you can see, some slight changes to the user interface today because you are now seeing behind the magic screen. Because we decided to have a video version this evening, and that allows me to see my special guest for tonight, Ramon Marett, who are going to be talking to us about all sorts of sci-fi extravaganza stuff in the evening. So, Ramon, you should be live. Let's just do a little bit of a sound check, make sure everything's working.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Am I live?
Yes, it sounds good, actually. I'm just going to tweak that down just a slightly bit. I think we're good. So that's excellent. And the chat seems to be working as well. We have fantastic books publishing in the chat as well. And Marie as well from FPP. So fingers crossed the technicalities are all working. So that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Right, we need to do the thing because the thing is the thing. We always do a thing at the beginning of the stream, which is for some bizarre reason we've got into the habit of reading out all the people in the chat who are here. Just because we do. So anyway, so who have we got first? Pete SB is first in the chat. Welcome to you, Pete SB. It's always good to see you. Commander JR 1988 is here. ZX81, which is an excellent username. Always good to see you, ZX81. Commander Duskthorn is here. Havabubu is here. And Marie from FBP is here as well, which is always good. The Shadow Wyvern is here. Fantastic books publishing themselves. We're not worthy. We're not worthy. Thank you very much for popping in. The Landra is here. Commander Tragic Blue is here. DJ Squibby is here as well. Arrakis is here, ready to invade the Harkonian Empire. No, it's the other way around, sorry. Arrakis is here, fending off the invasion of the Harkonians. Commander Terraformer is here all the way from sunny USA. Lucky Luigi is here. The Benji09 is here. Excellent username. And we also have Alan RP42 and more are still coming in, which is excellent. So welcome, whatever time zone you're in. And Glenn is basically saying, wow, Drew and another real person. Yes, I know there are actually other real people out there on the internet, which is fantastic. So we've increased technicalities this evening. You'll be impressed by our technical expertise. We've actually got video working in both directions, which is a new thing. And we can see each other, and you guys hopefully can see us as well. And as long as it all hangs together, we should be good. So that's going to be good. So same format as we normally do. I'm going to ask a few kind of questions, and Ramon is going to answer those, hopefully, and we'll have a good conversation. If you have questions, then obviously chuck them into the chat, and I will pass them on, because unfortunately Ramon can't see the chat very easily, so I will pass those along once I see them. So stick them both in the chat, and I will do my best to kind of field all the different questions. But anyway, Ramon, who are you? Give us an intro. 30 seconds on who you are.
Oh, God. I should have read this, shouldn't I? My background is advertising. I work in TV advertising. I write TV commercials for a living. I've done for the last 20 years.
Okay, well, yep.
And funny enough, when I was at university, so I'd never do advertising. It's the evil. But then I needed a job as soon as you leave university, and then been doing it ever since. That's how that happened.
It's quite impressive staying in the same job all those years. That's good going. Well done.
Yeah. Funny enough, I was having a chat with my daughter about it today, about staying in one job for so long.
Yeah.
Moved around a bit, company-wise, but the same industry. Yeah. Come from Devon, born in Plymouth.
Okay.
Currently living just outside Exeter at the moment, but. And have 2 children. And what else do you want to know?
I think that's a good start. Well, I mean, I suppose the other thing, you are a fellow Elite Dangerous author, aren't you? So you could certainly mention that early on.
Yeah, Easy Way Out. I wrote one of the short stories in the anthology.
Tales from the Frontier. Is that right?
Right. Yeah.
It was a while ago now. I'm just. It's like almost 10 years, isn't it? Yeah, it is. It's I mean, time's are ticking, which is quite scary.
That was my first published story. Well,
right.
I don't know, the Drabble count, because that was in the newsletter, wasn't it?
Yeah, a little bit before that. Yeah.
Drabble before that.
Wow. Okay, that's cool. There's already a question actually here. Actually from Fantastic Books Publishing. So I don't know if there's a hidden agenda. Is there a hidden agenda behind this question? I'm not sure. Let's find out. Question, Ramon: is it true you are the only person to date ever to slay a dragon in your locality?
I'm the only person to have slain the spider.
Oh,
So
okay.
he's talking about archery. There's a place in Devon called Dragon Archery,
Right.
and they have four ranges. Um, the normal circular target, then the dinosaur range where you're shooting dinosaurs, a
Okay.
range where you're killing orcs,
Okay.
and
Cool.
obviously with the archers,
Yep.
and then the final stage is a dragon, and it's a full-size dragon-ish, 20 meters away, and you get a little tennis ball. That's its weak spot, and you've only got 2 hours to hit that with.
Right. Okay. That sounds quite fun.
Quite a few people have done that. I've done that, I think, the most, but I've probably been there the most, so I don't know if it, you know. But
I
then
like that idea. That's really
in the
good.
dinosaur range, there's a spider at the back, and he's
Right.
on a web. The only person ever in the world who have hit that with all six of my arrows.
Oh, nice.
And I think they've been open since 2004.
So come the apocalypse and come the orc invasion, we're in good hands. Yeah.
Funnily enough, we've already decided when the apocalypse does happen, we're all heading there because they've got a brilliant view
Yep.
across Dartmoor. We can see everything coming. Make the arrows there. You know, we'll be prepared.
Absolutely perfect. Fantastic. Excellent. Excellent. That's cool. And we have a new person in the chat, Sue Knight. Hello, Sue. Good to see you. Thank you very much for popping in as well. That's excellent. So, Commander JR98 was saying, "Oh, Slayer Dragon." I misread. I thought it was Data Dragon. I don't think you want the Data Dragon, do you? No.
No.
That'd be quite funny. Right. Well, let's go. That's right. Yeah. On with the questions then. So I mean, advertising and writing, I suppose, have got some common ground in the sense that you need to be quite creative. I mean, have you always been a creative type of person?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I sort of shined at school with it. I was kind of sort of pushed into doing the art side, yeah. So, and my very first job actually was painting scenery for like West End shows. I think Oliver was the first one that I
Oh wow! Okay, yeah.
That was when Russ Abbott was playing Fagin. If you
Right.
remember Russ Abbott. And I actually got to meet the guy that wrote Oliver. I can't remember his name now.
Is that?
It'll come back to me. But obviously not Charles Dickens. I mean the music for it.
You're not that old, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not that old. No. So yeah, I've always painted. I've always done the art side of things.
Okay.
I even did the front cover for our book, and then got into the advertising side of things because I needed a job.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ended up working in an ad agency in London. Worked for some big clients, and eventually sort of set out on my own. So I think from about 2008, I've had my own ad agency.
Okay. Right.
You know,
okay. So you sort of work for
smaller
yourself.
companies, taking the the London skill, if you like.
Yeah.
You know, that sort of I don't know what you would call it, but it seems to get some kind of prestige, although it shouldn't.
Yeah.
Bring it to clients in the southwest.
Okay, nice. So you basically you just provide advertising services locally or relatively locally.
I would say yes, but I have clients in Scotland as well.
Okay.
The plan was to do it locally, but you build a bit of a reputation.
Go where the work is, yeah.
ITV, you know, they sort of, I've got to go to a Sky event in next week, actually, next Tuesday, which I don't really like doing, but yeah. So you get known.
Yeah.
We did an advert for fostering in Somerset, and that just won an award last July, one of the sort of prestigious awards for local government.
Okay, wow.
So,
okay, yeah.
Then that gets sort of, you know, people talk about it.
And then the word spreads, obviously. Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. So a question from Sue, actually: have you ever written for the theatre?
No, I haven't. No, but we are working on a screenplay. Me and one of the old, because with TV advertising, you normally have a writing partner. One of my old partners from, must have been sort of 2000, around that sort of time period, before 2004 anyway. We're writing a screenplay at the moment, but it's not for theatre.
Yep. But, nice. Okay, so
it's like for fun, but we went to, there's a company called Ingenious in London they sort of invest in films, and I think they invested in the James Bond films. You know, they sort of plump
Yeah.
up the money. So that we went to them quite a while ago, and it got put on hold. But they were very keen with it. Obviously, they said, you know, you need to get a producer attached to this. But it was very saleable. Was their
Word?
word.
Yeah. Okay. Nice.
It's a spy series on Mars.
Okay. Well, that sounds that's quite good. So there's a sci-fi element creeping in here every so often. So I mean, does your
I like reading
Yeah.
fantasy, but I like writing sci-fi.
Okay, so I mean, unpack that a bit for us. Where's the love of sci-fi and fantasy come from?
Probably fantasy, probably The Hobbit, because I read it
Right.
when I was really young. Sci-fi, I think I like watching sci-fi. You know, I loved Buck Rogers when we were younger.
Or sort of the late 70s one.
The Jill Gerard.
Yeah. Fantastic stuff. Yeah.
And obviously Star Trek, when that used to be good, and so I think, and Star Wars.
Yeah.
You know, all the classic.
Classic. Interesting that. So your science fiction has come mostly from film stroke TV, whereas The Hobbit obviously has been made into a film, but it's much earlier being a book. Yeah.
Books were The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings. Where else did I go with this? Like, I love at the moment I'm reading all the Brandon Cornwell. They've made it into the Netflix series The Last Kingdom.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sort of quite far into that one now.
Okay.
I love Brandon Cornwell books.
Yeah.
I've read Dashing Gore books. I read one he did about Stonehenge. I think he's a brilliant writer. I love his first person point of view, which is why the Elite Dangerous story that I wrote, I did it first person. I just love how you get really engrossed in the character because you are that character in that story.
Yeah. First person writing. Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one. I must admit, I'm a third person kind of a writer, but that's just
The Starbreaker was third person, but I think that was down because I wrote it with my brother.
Yeah.
Down to Simon, really. But there were a few elements in that story where we tried to really put you in the shoes of the characters. Especially, there's a moment where they don't know what's going on. They're getting mind read.
Right. Okay.
By aliens, and they don't know what's going on. And the way we've written it, hopefully, you don't know what's going on, and you almost get to a point where you're like, "Oh, have I missed a bit?" And then you slow as the character slowly starts to figure it out.
You're able to figure it out too. Yeah.
At the same time.
Okay,
That's the
quite
plan
nice.
anyway.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do. I think it works really nicely. We haven't sort of milked it. It really happens a few times, but because you'll get used to it. But hopefully we've done that, because I really love it when you can sort of put yourself into the story.
Yeah. Okay. So that's interesting. So that's I mean that's now we'll get onto the Star Protocol in a bit.
Yeah,
that's right. Don't worry. It doesn't matter where we go. It just happens. So going back into the childhood stuff for a moment. So what sort of age did you read The Hobbit?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I was still in primary school. I was still in primary school because my teacher at secondary school, I was reading one of the C.S. Lewis books, The Prince of Caspian, because we had to read for 10 minutes before the start of our English lesson, and I loved it, and I just said, "Can I just carry on reading this?" And he said, "Yeah, sure." So I was able
A child who reads, that's like
looking back,
oh my god, yes, yeah.
He just let me read that, and I think for about 3 or 4 English lessons I was just reading this, and that must have been in the second year, like year 7 or 8.
Really, really early on. It's interesting actually because I read. I read The Hobbit about the same age, and I remember being totally blown away that here was an adventure story with weird and crazy characters in it that was actually great fun to read. I remember being hugely impressed by it, and I think I pestered my parents immediately to go and get me Lord of the Rings. And then I remember, I'd read The Hobbit, which is a fairly lightweight book, really, isn't it? And then, quite small. And this massive tome appeared. It's like, what the hell's that? And it was a bit different from The Hobbit, wasn't it? You start getting into the Lord of the Rings, it's a little bit more meaty, particularly when you're young.
Yeah, I probably struggled with Lord of the Rings when I very first read it as a kid.
Yeah. I didn't. I think I tried at about the age of 10, and I didn't get going. And I think I went back to it about the age of 13, and then I remember being able to read it. So it was a a bit of a jump.
Yeah.
Tolkien's marketing strategy was appalling. Yeah, is this where you produced his book? But yeah, interesting stuff.
I don't know if this is going off topic completely, but I was watching an interview with J.R. Tolkien, and he was saying when he wrote The Hobbit, he said he was marking some exam papers, which everybody knows, but he said he was getting really bored, and one of his students had just left the whole page blank, and he said, and he was tempted to give this person an extra mark or an extra 5 marks because he'd left the page blank, and then he wrote, in a hole in the ground.
Lived a Hobbit. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, wow. I mean, it's interesting. Isn't
like
it?
that. Let me think. Oh, that's a blank page. That's worth an A. I'm going to bump them up. Just not answering any questions, just to make their life easier.
Yeah, it was a different world back then, I think. So, and what was it about those sci-fi shows that you liked? What, if you were to boil them down to their essence, what was it about Buck Rogers and Star Wars and Star Trek that kind of excited you?
Well, Buck Rogers and Star Trek, we would sit down as a family and watch that.
Right. Okay.
But I wonder if that has some strength to it. And Star Trek, they would always have a good story. I just think I like the future. I like imagining where we're going to be.
Yeah.
And sort of picturing where we're going to be in the future, and then the sort of fantasy and the history side of things. I think I just like reading about history, especially with history. Like with the Bernard Cornwell stuff, it's real, so you kind of
Yeah.
I like to read about it.
Yeah.
And with the sci-fi, you can imagine a future, and
I must admit, I've gone through several iterations with Star Trek because I remember I loved the original series when I was a kid because it was a spaceship, right? And there were phaser beams and transporters and Mr. Spock and stuff. And as I got older, I started noticing the extra layers to Star Trek. There was a diverse crew, and they tended to, not all the time, but they sometimes would talk their way out of problems rather than just shooting their way out of problems. And I started noticing various things like that. And I remember thinking. Very naively, but I suppose at the age of about 15 or 16, all you need to do to solve a problem is you need to come up with the right speech.
Especially in the card era, yeah.
Exactly. And
Star Trek did it really well with Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. You would have Spock, who's very logical.
Yep.
And McCoy, who's very emotional.
Yes.
And they would give both sides of the argument, and then you got Kirk in the middle, who's a bit logical and a bit emotional. Yep. He's the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
They would take the advice from both of them and go, right, this is the right answer.
And I like that. I like that, the tension between, and both would appreciate, kind of the other viewpoint as well. You start to see those dynamics, and I must admit, I began to see that as I got older, and appreciated Star Trek over again for what they were trying to do with that kind of stuff. I think that was quite good.
As a child, you sit with your family watching it, and you, like you say, spaceships, lasers, it's really good fun. You watch it again when you're older. These are really good stories.
Yeah, they are, aren't they? Yeah, I mean, there's some of them are awful, but some of them are really thought-provoking.
That's the thing about when it's episodic, isn't it? You can,
yeah.
But if there is a bad one, you've got next week to look forward to.
Well, that's exactly, I must admit, my family, we still watch them today when we're together, and we always have a bit of a chuckle, particularly at the end of a Star Trek episode when the crew have solved the problem and they all get on the bridge and have a little laugh,
Yeah.
So, and we all do the same as the episode closes. The whole family goes, ha 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 ha, yeah, it's great, all that sort of stuff. So it's interesting, some of that stuff that comes out. So I suppose if we talk about Elite for a moment. So were you playing Elite back in the early 80s?
Had Elite on the BBC.
Oh, you're a BBC man. Excellent. All right, then.
BBC. Well, my dad was going out to get a Commodore 64, so me and my little brother were really excited about that, and he came back with the BBC, which did disappoint us.
Is that good? I was going to say, is that good or bad at that point? Yeah.
Well,
because the BBC was much more expensive than the C64, wasn't it? So was he?
Wasn't it?
I think it was. Yeah.
Because we got the BBC Master.
Yep.
And then we got the Archimedes. And I don't know if you've ever played Elite on the Archimedes.
Yes, just briefly. Yeah, it was amazing for its time. I think. Yeah.
It was incredible. Yeah, because you had patrols of Vipers.
Yep.
that would fly the planets, and you had it was all filled in graphics. You had a bit of a docking sequence.
Right. Okay. So lots of sophistication compared to the early versions. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was super smooth with the mouse. But I only ever got to Dangerous.
Right.
On all of them, and I think on Elite Dangerous, I've only got to Dangerous.
Right.
Oh, I think I got to Elite. I think I got to Elite in the exploration on Elite Dangerous.
Okay.
But
Okay.
with the combat still Elite Dangerous.
Yeah. We're a bit older now, though, aren't we? it's a lot more playing. So, was that a game? I mean, for me, Elite was quite a groundbreaking thing. I remember buying or getting it for Christmas. I think it must have been 1984. I've worked out. On my, I'm a ZX Spectrum man, so all cards on the table there. But so we had to wait a little bit longer because it had to be ported. But I remember, this big box, and inside the box there was a flight instruction manual, and there was the novella, The Dark Wheel, and I remember reading that. Now, I played, I got the game and played it, probably for about 3 hours non-stop, or Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, whatever it was. And then, of course, come bedtime, it's like, switch the computer off, you've got to go to bed now. So, of course, then I've got the Elite books, I've got to go read that. And I remember reading this book thinking, this is amazing, somebody's been paid money to write a space adventure. And I'm thinking, is that allowed? Is that something you're allowed to do? And that really, I can trace my... You mean you can actually get paid for writing space stories then to that precise moment as I read that novella, and it's Robert Holdstock was quite a great author. I mean, that actually isn't anywhere near his best work, but it was a pretty decent piece of storytelling for the game at that point in time. And I remember thinking, this is amazing. You can get paid for writing space stories. I could do that, and I can literally recall my own writing career literally to that novella. So I have big thanks to Robert Holdstock for writing it. What was your sort of reaction to? Did you read that novella, and did it
I read it. I tell you what, I read it because my dad was the one that was playing Elite.
Right. Okay.
And he was like, "Oh, what's that?" And he showed me how to play it, and I played it. And he would go, because it was 8 galaxies, wasn't it?
Yes.
And he would go through. He would get the galaxy, the extra hyperspace to jump to the galaxies. And every time he'd be in there, he'd press F to find, and he would type Raxler.
Oh, he was searching for it, right? Okay, awesome.
He was never in there, and and it was like, why are you searching for that particular planet? He's like, because it's in this book.
Yep.
And he was convinced it was somewhere. So
then I was in the game. Oh,
well, he was convinced it was. He was convinced it must just be hidden.
Yep.
Just trying to find out until he eventually realised it probably wasn't in the game. But then that's what made me read the book, because he was searching for a planet that was in the book. So it was like, oh, it's properly related to this game. It's not just it's not just a bit of marketing.
Yeah.
It was great because it had they started off, they got the pilot's license, didn't they?
That's right. Yeah, and then they go off eventually. Well, they don't find Raxler in the story either. Of course, it's a who knows what it is, and it still hasn't been found today. So it's still a mystery, which is quite nice. Yeah, a mystery that's been around since 1983. I think that's pretty cool. It's almost 40 years now.
It's a big ask to answer that mystery, then, isn't it?
Well, I suppose the danger now is how can you possibly do justice to 40 years of speculation on something? That's a difficult one, I think, for them to figure out.
They're going to have to either do something really mundane. I don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah.
Actually.
I must admit, I racked my brains. What would I do if they said, right, Drew, you're in charge of sorting out Raxler in the game? I thought, what would you do? I don't know. It's a tough one, isn't it? But the idea of having a mystery in a sci-fi novel like that, obviously connected to a game, it was pretty cool. And I think
Elite was so good because it relied on your imagination.
And that's the trick, isn't it? Yeah.
Any game that they make now will never be as good as the original version in the nicest possible way, because the original version, the graphics were all in your head, which are way better than anything out now.
You could imagine the stories and things. Yeah.
Civil War going on. So I fly there and I know what's happening on the planet. I know what the Civil War is, and I know the factions. You just imagine it, don't you?
Yeah.
Especially when you're younger and your imagination's really big.
I do think, looking back on it now, that it was a magic period of time which I don't think can be recreated, because the generation kind of before us didn't have computers really as children.
No, they didn't.
It didn't. They just weren't there. Our generation caught an interesting moment in time when the computers were enough to be prevalent. We were all talking about them in the schoolyards, weren't we? And swapping bootleg copies of games and all that sort of dodgy stuff, right? Sorry, guys. But the games were by today's standards laughably primitive, right? But they felt big and significant when we were at school. And games like Elite have stuck with us because they made such an impression on, I suppose, an age that we were at the time, which we were very malleable, and we were sucking in all sorts of things and trying to cobble together our personalities, against the backdrop of the 80s. And I think there was a perfect moment in time where that simplicity, but the depth and the imagination that we put into that gaming environment can't really be done again, because games today are so amazingly super realistic. They almost don't allow for the same sort of imaginative input from the player.
The books that came with it, I know we had the Dark Wheel, but just the instruction manual. It was a pilot's manual.
Yes, yeah.
And it had pictures of the Anaconda docking bay in there as well, so it sort of gave you glimpses of what it looks like. But it felt like a real flight manual that you would read in real life to then go and
exactly. Yeah. So it felt like you were the pilot because you were being handed this instruction manual.
These days, don't they? It's all about immersion. You think, well, this was something physical. It was the proper flight manual that a real Cobra pilot would have received.
Exactly, and it makes you feel like you're there. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, that's interesting.
And the funny thing is, I always imagined that the image that you see was like, I imagined like a big spaceship, and the image that you've got in that game of Elite is actually just like one of the little, like the flight panels that you get in a plane at the moment. That bit. Which is why I can change the cameras to the back and front and back as well. I'm not actually looking out on my. Yep. Maybe there weren't windows in those.
Yeah, that's right. The ships were completely sealed, perhaps.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting.
Your imagination is just like, there's obviously looks like this. It's just.
And I think that was the magic of that era, is that we had, because the graphics were so sparse, you had to inject the imagination to make the game. And I think in some ways people have sometimes overlooked the ability of the player to place more of themselves into the game, which I don't think modern games allow in quite the same way, because they're just like being there, aren't they? In terms of the graphics. So it's interesting to see how that's. So I think we got lucky. I do feel like we were in a privileged place. That
I do, but then I also remember thinking, God, I wonder what the graphics will be like in 20 years' time.
Yeah, exactly.
If it's realistic, and so.
Yep. And I remember as they improved dramatically in the 90s, and the 3D graphics cards came out and all that kind of stuff. It was a fascinating era to watch that change as well. So it is interesting. So I mean, we need to talk about then the Tales from the Frontier. So how did you? Obviously, you played Elite, and presumably you played the second Elite. Frontier Elite 2, that one came with an anthology, didn't it, as I recall? Yeah. So that sort of sets the tone for an anthology. So how did you get connected up with Elite Dangerous and the second anthology, as it were?
So just going back on your previous point about writing stories, when I was a kid, I would write Transformer stories.
Okay.
I think I wrote a Star Wars story, and it was like I made the book and the front cover and all that. So I've always done that sort of thing.
Yep.
Then advertising, I write 30 seconds. You're talking about getting paid for writing.
Yeah.
Paid to write 30 seconds just seems obscene. But then the Kickstarters. So the anthology was also a Kickstarter, because I think you kickstarted Kickstarters for.
Yeah, I did that whole thing. Yeah.
and I knew I had a story in my head, and I didn't want to retrofit it to Elite, but it fit perfectly with Elite. And it's probably because I probably was thinking about Elite when I came up with the story anyway.
Right.
It's a trader whose ship has broken down and he's sort of stuck in space. Now, the only trading games that I knew were Elite, and there was another one called Federation of Free Traders on the Amiga. But Elite was the trading game, so it was already an Elite story. And then obviously the opportunity came to do the Kickstarter, and I thought, yeah, do you know what, I'm gonna go for that.
Yep.
And write this story. So that's where that came. And then obviously you've still got to write a good story that people are going to
enjoy. So was there a, what was it like being part of that anthology team? Was it, did you talk a lot with the other authors, or was it a lot of independent work? Or
a couple of them, yeah. I think it started. We sort of, it was quite a nice experience because we were sharing our ideas, and we were able to say, you need jeopardy in your story, so maybe put a timer on a collision that's going to happen, things like that. It was kind of like what they do in Star Trek, to be honest. There's always,
it's a set piece with some jeopardy coming. Yeah.
About an hour, 45 minutes to an hour, depending on how long the episode is. That's when the sun's going to blow up. Right. There's always,
there's a timer ticking down that will go on about 30 minutes in. Yeah.
And you can't escape because other reasons. But it was nice to be able to bounce ideas like that off each other. But then keeping it, we got the Elite Dangerous Bible, didn't we? With everything that was in it. I wanted to use one of the new ships to make it Elite Dangerous rather than Elite. I didn't want to go back. Although the one I used was a Type 4, which never made it into the game anyway.
Oh, right. Okay.
A version called the Type 6. But they did say, well, that's fine. There could have been a Type 6 between Elite and a Type 4 between Elite and Elite Dangerous. And it was going to be in an escape pod, and then they decided in the game you weren't going to have an escape pod.
Yep. So
and then, funnily enough, that actually made my story better because setting it on the ship gave my character a lot more things to do. It's floating in space for 5 years.
Yeah.
And sort of stuck in a little escape pod might have been harder. He was able to go to the car.
It's bad enough being stuck in the spaceship for 5 years. He's stuck in an escape pod for 5 years. I think you'd go completely insane if you hadn't already gone insane.
Yeah. Going insane, but I didn't want to. I think the insanity has been done to death, and I didn't want to go down that route.
Yep.
But now he has some Lavian and brandy on board, but it's ancient Lavian and brandy had been floating in space for a few thousand years. So it was perfectly preserved, and he bought it with all of his money.
Yep.
And he's convinced it's fake, and he didn't spend any money looking after his ship, so it broke down, it misjumped, and then
he's kind of marooned himself.
Yeah, he's marooned himself. Yeah. I don't know how much more of the story I should say, but
no. So I mean, did you? And was that the first story you'd published? Was that?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's presumably how you got in touch with Fantastic Books, is it? Yeah,
and that's how I knew Fantastic Books. And then my brother had a sci-fi story, the Star Protocol with the ancient aliens that he was talking about.
Okay.
Which is more like I would say my Elite Dangerous story is a I mean, children could read it, but it's a bit more adult. Star Protocol was very Flash Gordon.
Right. Okay.
We would want to read it, but it's not 2010. It's not hard sci-fi at all.
Yep.
It's plausible, but it's not hard sci-fi.
Okay. So that novel, when did that come out? That's relatively recent, though, isn't it?
Started a couple of years ago. I think.
Yeah. Okay. So 2 years ago. So was that book? Was that in gestation for quite a long time then, as an idea, or?
Whilst we were writing it, Horatio was born, my son.
Right.
And then looking after a son and looking after a newborn and writing, especially as there was a 10-year gap between him and our daughter.
Yep.
It just made writing a bit difficult.
Yeah, I can completely sympathise with that one.
With the day job as well. And it just sort of took longer than we had originally planned.
Yep.
But I think it's probably worth it. When you get to spend that extra time, you go back and you read the first pages, and then like something will happen later on, and you think, do you know what, we can sort of reference that at the start. Plant the seeds of what's going to happen. So it was really nice actually taking that time to write it.
Yep.
But I think putting a career head on, you need to write quicker than 4 years to bring it.
Yeah. I mean, so I suppose I'll jump to the end of my questions then for a moment. In terms of your sort of aspirations as a writer, where do you want to go? I mean, you've got the current job with which presumably you're still in as a marketing guy. Do you see yourself doing writing as a thing instead of that, or do you see you keep doing your kind of day job, and writing is a thing that you enjoy. You keep around the edges. Where do you see yourself going with it?
So, right. So, yeah, that's a good question. If it could take over, that would be the number one job, to sit and write. There's something really pleasant about it, especially when you can be sitting in front of your computer for hours and not write anything. But I still think that's part of the process. You have to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And then when you write an originalised passage and you're really chuffed with yourself, that was really nice, pat yourself on the back. You might come back to the next day and think, oh, it was rubbish, why did I write like that? But you do get a nice feeling when you're writing. And it does, I don't think it ever really becomes a chore when you're writing stuff that you like.
Yeah. That you're making up yourself and you're creating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously me and Simon we're working on the Star Protocol 2. I don't know, I think The Blood Princes is kind of a title we might be going for. I'm doing this screenplay with James, and I'm working on a comic. I've got this little cartoon character called Marshall Bug, which I've had since I was 12, and I've sort of started re-sketching a few pictures, and I've posted them on Instagram. And now I don't have many followers on Instagram, about 400. And generally I get about 20 or 30 likes on these pictures. This Marshall Bug one's got over 500. And I only have 4 followers.
Yeah. How did that happen? Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. How did that happen? That's interesting. My son loves it. And he's like, oh, can we write a story together? I'm like, yeah.
That's an interesting idea. Yeah.
Again, that could be saleable. But if it's not, that's a really nice hobby to have, especially with my son, if we can do like little cartoon characters.
Yeah, definitely.
He's a cowboy bug that doesn't really look like any kind of bug, because it was a 12-year-old that drew it originally.
Right. Okay, interesting. Yeah.
12-year-old me that drew him originally.
Interesting.
So a few little creative things on the side. But you know what it's like. You have loads of projects that
way too much to ever get done.
Yeah.
We'll come back to the family thing in a minute. I'm interested in that. So there's a question here though from Commander Terra Firma, who is Ramon. You said Star Protocol was more Buck Rogers for a younger audience. Do you feel that sci-fi for kids is underserved? And do you prefer that more than writing sci-fi for kind of, I suppose, a more adult audience?
I really enjoyed writing the Star Protocol. I liked writing for kids. There are in the Star Protocol, like because it's modern day really. They're 2 Delta Force soldiers and a spy,
right?
That go and find a 1950s style flying saucer.
Okay,
and
cool.
And it takes them off to the Andromeda Galaxy with these archaeologists. In there, the guns that they've got, we say the full name of the gun, because when I was a kid and you read stuff and it's like with the Apache helicopter or the F-18. So we say the F-A-18 intercept. We give the full title of this thing. So I remember when I was a kid, I'd see that.
Yep.
I'd go and look at what that was. We didn't just say fighter plane.
No, it was an F-18 or an F-16 or an F-15, Strike Eagle and things. Yeah, that's right.
Exactly. Yeah. So we've made sure we reference exactly what the name of these things are, because that was just what I liked reading when I was a kid. I just liked that sort of thing. So I don't know if it's. I think Star Wars is still really for kids. I do enjoy it, but I think. I don't know if it's. That's a difficult one. I can't think of any recent sci-fi that is for the younger adult, but I think it's kind of a universal subject anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, I see what you mean, because I would say Star Wars, the films were probably oriented with younger viewers in mind, at least accessible to younger viewers, even if not directly aimed at them. I'm thinking to myself, I watched the original Star Wars when I was 7 with my dad, and I remember being totally blown away by it. So it clearly was accessible to a 7-year-old, and I don't remember anything in it that kind of spooked me or maybe kind of go, ooh, it was just an amazing space adventure, the like of which I'd never seen before. So I suppose arguably Star Wars is. I think Star
But I
Trek.
watched 2010 when I was young. I
Yeah,
enjoyed.
yeah, and I remember watching it as a young teen. Again, I enjoyed it. So it's a bit. It feels quite a long-winded film nowadays,
But then I
but
think the Star Trek rule is aimed at teens.
yeah,
I wouldn't read it to my 6-year-old.
yeah,
But when he's 13, 12, 13, 14, I'll definitely read it to him.
yeah, yeah. And sometimes we probably.
Your son says it's rubbish, Dad. I don't know if I could handle that.
Well, I mean, I've taken my kids. Well, they're not kids anymore, but I've taken my youngsters or my young adults through various bits of Star Trek and Star Wars, and they're big fans of Star Wars. They'll come and see a Star Wars movie with me anytime, and they like Star Trek, and they've got an appreciation for some of the more classic films and some of the books and stuff, which is great. But if somebody said to me, what would you recommend a 13-year-old reading in the science fiction realm? I think I might struggle with that a bit. Certainly, of anything new.
Yeah, I don't know about. I mean, the Timothy Zahn Star Wars stories were good.
Yep.
They were really well written. One book I absolutely love is Ashes of Eden, and it's written by William Shatner, and it's the sequel to Generation, Star Trek 7, basically.
Okay. Yep.
That's probably a guilty pleasure.
I haven't read that one. I must admit. No, that's interesting. Okay, so that's cool.
Well, so,
yeah.
But recent sci-fi. I mean, the book I'm currently reading is Dune. I went back and read that because of the film that's coming out.
What do you make of Dune as a book?
Brilliant now.
Yep.
Yeah. I must admit the film helps because I can visualize.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
I'm seeing the film now when I'm reading it, and I'm seeing the actors playing the characters. So, yeah. I mean, I think it's a bit slowing down a bit in the middle, but
yeah, and it's interesting enough. I mean, Dune, I've reread recently as well, because after having seen the film, because I thought I really haven't read that book for a long time.
Yeah.
And I was quite surprised reading the book to find that it was very much more dialogue based than I'd expected it to be. There's virtually no description in it at all of anything. There's a bit. It's a desert. There isn't much water. The guys are wearing the still suits. We will get on a spaceship. Oh, we've got there. You've no idea what the spaceships look like. There's no description of how it works. There's no in-flight scenes at all. As you're reading the book, it's literally we've got there. The spaceships are totally incidental to this story about Arrakis, and it was interesting to me because I mean nowadays you kind of expect a bit of a space transit. It's a big part of movies and films and things, but it's just totally absent in Dune.
Yeah, it's more about this the mother and
mother and son relationship, isn't it? Yeah. So
I didn't really notice, but now that you've said, I'm like, oh yeah. It wasn't really.
It struck me as different to what we're used to. Yeah. And I think science fiction has gone through those sorts of, because I mean, if I cast my mind back, I'm doing a bit of 80s nostalgia here, so apologies for that, and apologies to the chat as well because I quite often do this. But things like Battlestar Galactica and Buck Rogers and things were probably by modern eyes are pretty cheesy, but I don't think they felt cheesy at the time, but they're probably relatively cheesy now. And it was all bright lights and kind of gung ho and flashing this, that, and the other. And that was what it was in the late 70s, early 80s. And then we had Star Wars, which of course reset our expectations of what was possible, I think. And then
sorry, go on.
Yeah, and then what I noticed in the 90s and into the noughties is science fiction seemed to get really quite dark and quite serious for quite a long time. So you had shows like Farscape and you had shows like Babylon 5. Where there was, the episodic story was still there, but you had a much longer story arcs and character development over several episodes and stories that didn't wrap up in the 45 minutes and stuff like that. And then you see things like the reimagined Battlestar Galactica, which is very grim and very dark. Doesn't bear hardly any resemblance to the original show at all. So, what's your sort of observation of science fiction and fantasy genres over that time?
Yeah, I think I guess politics takes over, doesn't it? Like when it got darker, that was we had the Iraq War starting, and it was the world seemed like a grimmer place. I think the 80s, everybody was it was
everything was brilliant.
It was doing well, wasn't it? Everything was brilliant. Well,
It was, yeah. I know what you mean.
It does well.
Yeah. I suppose in some ways, certainly at time, and not always through the 80s, because there were some pretty grim moments in the 80s, but I think perhaps late 70s, early 80s, in some ways, there was a sense of optimism about some things, which I think is reflected in the media of the time. But, there were some pretty dark things going on at the time as well. So I don't know. It just feels science fiction went for a really grim and gritty, realistic phase.
I just wonder if it's the teachers, because most writers pretty much go to the same schools, don't they? There's only a few, especially in America, that churn out the writers. So
maybe, yeah.
Who was their lecturer at the time?
We can blame them for the style.
Yeah.
That's right. And fantasy is not immune either, because I mean, if you think of fantasy in the 70s and 80s, then we had things like most of it was quite kind of, I suppose, sort of fluffy and nice sort of fantasy. For the most part, heroes go on a quest and they succeed in a quest, and
like Lady Hawk.
Yeah, Lady Hawk, and I'm thinking, what was the other one? Legend with Tom Cruise in it, things like that. It was quite nice and fluffy sort of fantasy. And then you get, obviously, relatively recent, you have things like Game of Thrones, which is just, it's too violent for me in places. It's too uncomfortable for me to watch. I can't quite cope with it, I like the fact that there are dragons and there's magic and I can cope with, armies having a battle. That's fairly a staple in fantasy novels. But I don't really need to see people being disemboweled and having bits of themselves chopped off when they're still alive and being tortured to death, in a horrible way. That's too much for me.
I liked Game of Thrones, but I liked it because it wasn't Lord of the Rings, and it wasn't trying to copy Lord of the Rings, except when with their use of magic, where you don't really see.
Yep.
The magic is all just implied, and I'm sure I've seen an interview with George R. Martin where he says he took that directly from Tolkien. Yeah, and
that, I always admired that about Tolkien. That he, it was an amazing, magical, mystical kind of land, but you hardly ever saw any actual magic, did you? There wasn't the sort of Harry Potter incantation type of magic. It just wasn't present. Yep.
Yeah. So, but I like both styles. I can watch Game of Thrones, but I love the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movies as well.
Yeah. I must admit, I was really sceptical about those, and when I went to see them, I was converted within minutes. I thought whoever Peter Jackson is, and I didn't know who he was at the time. I remember thinking, actually, this guy gets it. This is what I hoped I would see, and was dreading that I wouldn't. And actually, it turned out to be that actually no, he's nailed the atmosphere of Lord of the Rings.
I probably shouldn't have turned up at Hamlet's Deep, although I liked.
Yeah, I mean there was quite a few things that were changed, obviously, but I
don't think we were supposed to have any plate armor, were they? Tolkien never wrote plate armor; it was always chainmail. But when Gondor had plate mail,
it looked the part. I had to say.
Yeah,
no, that's quite good. Yeah. So that's interesting too. Okay, so let's spin this back round again. So this business about writing with your brother and writing with your son, is that that's quite unusual actually. So is your brother into similar sort of stuff, or?
So my brother is into the Ancient Aliens, which is the main sort of pull of the Star Protocol.
Right.
That the theory that aliens have been here, ancient astronauts. They've been here since the beginning. They possibly seeded the planet. I think there's loads of crazy ancient alien theories.
Yeah.
And
so is this a bit sort of Eric von Daniken kind of thing? Is it? Is this a bit Eric von Daniken kind of stuff? Yeah.
I don't know who that is.
Oh, he's a guy. Somebody in the chat will probably know. He wrote a book. I can't remember what it's called. But it was basically a collection of all the aliens have seeded the Chariots of the Gods. There we go. Commander Terrified. Chariots of the Gods. I remember reading that, thinking, "Wow, this is really, really cool." And then my dad said, "No, that's all nonsense. Don't pay attention to that."
No, it's all true. It's all true.
It's all true. Okay, right. Okay, fair enough. Good. Right, carry on.
So aliens destroyed the dinosaurs to make way for humans.
Right.
That did happen. Yes, we'll say that definitely happened in our story.
Okay. Right. Yeah.
I think one of the sort of the turning points in the story is 2012. the Mayan calendar end of mankind.
Yep.
And that obviously didn't happen. But it didn't happen because of what happens in our book.
Okay, right, okay. So you've plugged yourself into kind of established history. Yeah.
Loads of, like, I think if you don't know anything about it, you'll just enjoy it because it is Flash Gordon. It's Flash. If Flash Gordon was a Delta Force soldier,
Yep.
he's gone and he's gone into space, and they've saved they've saved a civilization. But there's loads more underneath it. That does make it an adults can read it and will
get a little bit more out of it.
Yeah, for sure.
So as your brother, is he a writer himself? Or is he what does he do?
I don't know. He works at the dockyard on the nuclear stuff. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say any more than that.
Top secret nuclear stuff.
Right. No, well, he's signed the official secrets. And
oh wow! Okay, right, yeah, okay. We better not get him into trouble.
But like, his big writing comes from D&D. He's
okay, so Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, so he's 5 years older than me. He's been playing that since I can remember. Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah. So and I think the story. It does feel they do level up as they go along, and you can see there's clear. I call them ender level bosses. The way he's inserted them in.
Right.
That's why I think the young kids they'll enjoy it.
They'll get it because that's still how games kind of work. Yeah.
The adventure way. But we did, our editor, he did sort of turn it back a bit, but he did say, they split up, but it's manageable. It doesn't feel like quest.
Right.
It sort of blends quite nicely. But just when I'm reading it, I'm thinking, when I'm writing it, here's your mid-level boss.
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
But so writing it with Simon was brilliant. He laid out the groundwork for the story. He had his vision, and then along the way, our stories kind of gelled. You talked about Dune being dialogue heavy. I would say our book is dialogue heavy,
right?
But the two main characters, their banter is me and Simon.
Okay, so that's quite nice. There's quite a lot of you in the story in that sense.
People that have read it, that's kind of like one of the big takes is like, we love the banter.
Yep.
So Simon would write something, I'm like, Dash isn't having that. Like,
that's quite nice. Yeah, that's quite nice.
He's not going back and forth. So a lot of that is in it, and it probably makes it more believable or more natural, I think.
Yeah. It's quite a thing with dialogue to get it to feel like it's natural, and that's a really nice thing to have, particularly if you've got two authors, I think, working on it. Another question for you. I like the ancient aliens concept for sci-fi, but I don't want to get lumped in with some of the crazy conspiracy theory lot. Do you worry that you might be lumped in with them?
Well, I'm the cynical one.
Right, okay, so that's good.
So I tone it down. And Simon is the believer.
Right.
He probably wouldn't admit it, but you can tell he likes it more than any other theory, put it that way.
Okay, cool.
And I'm cynical, so I'll tone it down and I'll try and say, like, this, these are the reasons why this is happening. And he's like, no, the aliens are the reasons why this is happening.
Yeah.
But it works in the story.
And does that come out in the characters then? Is one character more cynical and the other character's more, no, it's aliens,
Yeah. So that's why we got the spy in there. We got the spy. He's the cynical one. He's the British MI6. He's they all believe it in the end because they're sat on a flying saucer.
Okay. It's a bit of a giveaway, isn't it? When it's a flying saucer.
The reason they go on it is the archaeologist. He's searching for it. He's in Iraq.
Right.
They're at the cigarette, which is on the front cover. They're in there.
Right.
And even then, that's like shady. Like, well, how would he get a permit to go there? That's what I mean with the adult stuff. There's all loads of back.
Yeah, stuff that would have to be explained, whereas you wouldn't necessarily question that as a child. You just go, yep, they're at the cigarette.
No, that's fine, yeah. And he's the main believer. I actually think Dash and the two Delta Force guys, Dash and Will, they don't believe it until it becomes undeniable. but even then, the aliens that are in it, it's a bit Game of Thronesy-ish, that
Right.
no one's a goodie and no one's a baddie.
Mm-hmm.
They're all human.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I can't go too much into it. If you like the ancient astronaut theory, there'll be loads of little Easter eggs for you.
Right. Okay. Cool. Yeah.
If you don't like it, but you might read something and think, well, that's quite interesting. One of the ancient astronaut theories is there was genetic modification, and that's why you get stories of centaurs and Medusa and things like that.
Right. Okay.
It was actually
explaining all the ancient myths and things.
Yeah. So we've got loads of ancient myths in the story, which is something you don't really get in sci-fi. I think the only one maybe would be Star Wars, actually, because Star Wars is kind of King Arthur's story.
It's got a mythology to it, hasn't it? Yeah.
I mean, the lightsaber is Excalibur. Obi-Wan is Merlin. Luke is obviously Arthur. He gets the sword. You can match it. But ours is actual myths. We've got Medusa is in it because actually she's just an alien, genetically modified creature.
So you can kind of rationalise some of those old myths away by the fact that they actually did occur, but people then didn't understand what they were looking at, kind of thing.
And when you read it, you're like, it all makes sense now.
Yep.
Obviously it's true.
Well, yeah, exactly. It makes sense, therefore it must be true. Yeah. Okay, another question there. How did you share the writing of one story with your brother? Did you trade off characters or chapters, or did you write it together, or did you edit each other's stuff? How did that process work?
I think we decided that ultimately Simon was going to be in charge of the story.
Right.
But we get on so well, there wasn't really any arguments. I wrote a whole scene with John. I wrote his whole backstory, the spy, and sort of sent it over to Simon, and he just read it and said, I love this. This we can put this in here, and that was something that Simon hadn't even thought about.
Okay, interesting.
But because we knew these characters so well over the 4 or 5 years that we took to write it, when Simon was reading the backstory, it's like, well, yeah, obviously that's his backstory. The only difficulty came when we were sending each other stuff that we'd written at 2 o'clock in the morning. We'd come back and there'd be like sentences half finished or random words put in.
It's not the best time to write, really, is it? 2 o'clock in the morning. Yeah.
I'm just trying to sort of fix that and spotting each other's plot holes. You can get wrapped up in the sci-fi and go, oh well, let's do this tech, let's do this tech, let's do this tech, and sometimes it just becomes a bit like, well, if they can do
that, why wouldn't they just get themselves out of problem straight away or something? Yep.
Yeah.
I must admit, I found that with thinking I'd really like to have a gadget that does that, but I think if I introduce one of those, then why wouldn't they use it early on? Just get themselves out of trouble. Yeah.
I wanted to do space travel. They fly somewhere and it's 30 years later. I wanted to get that into a story because I don't think I've ever seen that done. But then we realised that you're getting when the characters split up, then they've gone, I don't know, 20 light years that direction. So they've only, had 3 years of time passed. But
the time dilation stuff is
to do it the Star Trek way, where there is you don't get that. You're allowed one big lie, aren't you?
I think that's what's quite clever about Star Trek in its kind of original candidates. In some ways, there weren't any new ideas there, but the idea of putting them all together, basically, okay, there's a warp drive which allows us to get to the next place quick. Yeah. That's what the warp drive is for. And a teleporter is like, well, we haven't got the budget to land the ship on the planet every week, so tell you what, we'll just materialise on the surface. We'll call that the transporter.
With newer sci-fi, now that they do have the budget to get on a ship, that's what they do, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because the trouble with the teleporter is like, well, why don't they just teleport them on? And that's the trouble using tech, when they're running away. Why don't you just use a teleporter?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then you would have to, because the clouds,
it's raining. The teleporter doesn't work.
They'd have to keep coming up with ways of why they couldn't use it.
Yeah.
It can become difficult.
So you have got to be a bit careful of those things, I think, in terms of
having 2 of us writing it together. We were able to spot each other's. Yeah, we were able to sort of rein ourselves in and go.
That's quite good. So I suppose you kind of got 4 eyes then on plot holes and things, and you're both looking at it from a slightly different perspective, which means you can kind of pull out all those sort of things before they get any further.
different ideas of where to take the story,
Mm.
and then we just picked the best one, I think.
Okay. So
They kind of blended. They kind of blended into it. There was one slight spoilery.
yeah. So spoilers, everybody, just in case. So
Well, there was a scene where they were getting prepared to jump to this new galaxy, and they were told it's a big jump.
Yep.
Get yourself prepared for it. And then the jump happened, and it was like, the next page was like, it was just happened in an instant. Nothing happened, and I thought, I don't like that.
Mm.
I want to do something. I want something to happen.
Yep.
So I changed it, and then when Zoe reread it, he said, I'm glad you've done that.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. Way of doing it. And vice versa, that happened as well.
So it sounds like this was.
It would be like, I don't like that.
Yeah.
And then it would, and actually, some stuff be like, I don't like that, and then we're like, well, I don't like that, and we both don't like that, so we've got to get.
We've got to figure something else out. So it sounds like quite an organic way of writing. So it doesn't sound to me like you had the story plotted out end to end. Is it sort of interpreted along the way?
I think when you've got the story, when you know what your ending is.
Yep.
I think it's always, when you know what your ending is, getting you're both heading in the same direction. So and because we are brothers, we do sort of think alike.
Yeah. Okay, that must be quite interesting. Yeah.
It's not like I'm writing with a complete stranger. And there's no ego, obviously.
Mm.
So we're on the same path, getting to that story. It was enjoyable. There was no stress to it.
Yeah. So how long did it take you? I mean, you sort of said 4 years, but is that presumably not 4 years elapsed time? So
I think it probably still would have been a couple of years.
And it was that just down to being able to find time to work together, or just other stuff that was going on, or
I run that agency.
Yep.
So I'm working all hours of the day. I've got to do work when we finish tonight. It's just
okay.
The way it is. So I think which is another reason why I would love the writing to take off. And I don't do the advertising anymore.
Yeah. Well, I suppose after you've done it for 30 years or whatever, it's quite a long time to have done the same thing.
2000, I got my first job. Obviously, 3 years in university before.
Yeah. Okay, so it's quite a while. Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. So, I suppose turn that around a bit in terms of challenges, in terms of writing the book. I mean, obviously, working with somebody else, even your brother, is a challenge, I suppose. But was there other stuff? I mean, the whole craft of writing, of characterization and good dialogue and good description, but not too much description. All those sort of writery things. How did you pick up the skills to do all those kind of things? Did that come out of the advertising kind of thing, or did you kind of pick that up from elsewhere?
Possibly. Reading books on writing are invaluable. Even stuff like there's a book. Save the Cat. It's about screenwriting.
Save the Cat. Okay. Yeah.
It's a brilliant book for just telling you how stories are structured, and you realise every kind of story is pretty much the same.
Yeah, a lot of similar elements all built together. Yep.
Yeah, you can break the rules, but we weren't going to break the rules in our first book, because we'll get ourselves established and write a lot longer before we start breaking the rules. And I think keeping it structured actually helps you write as well, doesn't it?
Yep. You're kind of used to that in a story, that you set off by introducing your characters bit by bit. They probably have a crisis to deal with early on. Yeah. etc. Yep.
And it makes it familiar for the reader, and it makes it easier for the reader to read, because they're not. I mean, we ours is a sci-fi. We probably jump into that genre, and we write the sci-fi that everyone's probably got in their heads.
Yep.
Anyway, so it's just that they're just along for the ride as well. It's quite a fast read. It's not a massive story.
Yep.
I think writing. I tell you, with the advertising, being direct in your language, without any of the fluff, really helps.
Okay.
Because it gets you into the story.
Got to cut to the chase, basically. Yep.
And you can fall into sort of being over elaborate with your descriptions that are just not really needed.
Yep.
And can actually ruin a story if you're over, if you're over fluffy with the writing, over flamboyant with the writing. That probably, I think, coming from an advertising background where you've got to get to the point in 30 seconds.
Yeah. Yep.
Maybe
It's going to make it nice and crisp. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, that's quite cool.
You do have to be quite descriptive, especially with sci-fi and fantasy, because you do need to do the world building, because you can't.
Yeah, there is that aspect. Is what's this place like?
Yeah, everyone knows what the M5 is.
Yeah.
When you're on an alien planet, you have to describe that a bit more.
Yeah, give them something to hook their own imagination into.
Yeah.
I've been told not to keep him up too late if you've got work to do, so we'll bear that in mind. Yeah. Okay, so that's good. So I mean, the Star Protocol itself. Did you have? Was there something that was compelling you to tell the story? Is there a bit of a theme to it? Is there a little bit of a message behind it, or is it just a rip-roaring adventure that you just wanted to write for a long time? What was the sort of genesis of it?
It's a retro story.
Yep.
It's a 1950s B movie, but it is done in a modern style.
Right.
The theme is family, teamwork.
Okay. Yep.
It's when they get together at the end and they work together as a team. That's when they win out.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
I like that. I mean, we wrote it as a family. I like the family bond. I like sort of a strong family story. I like the original Star Trek where the crew is a family.
It's the family. Yeah. Working together to come up against odds and pulling each other up, kind of thing. Yeah.
We also, there's a lot of sci-fi that says, mankind are a violent race.
Yep.
They are a violent race because everything is trying to kill us.
To be fair, most sci-fi, all the aliens are pretty nasty.
Had teeth long enough, it would be so venomous it would kill you. It's like everything tries to kill you. A mosquito would kill you. It's not a surprise. So it's like, yes, the human race is a violent species. We all know that, but we've all got friends that would give their lives for us. We've all got that family bond, hopefully, anyway. And that's what's good about humanity.
Okay, so it's a bit of celebration of some of those higher qualities, which is nice actually, because quite often it's science fiction. Relatively recently, I suppose, has been quite kind of gritty and not so pleasant. It tends to explore perhaps the darker side of humanity. So that's quite nice.
Well, you've got the enemy of the Anunnaki, which are anybody that's in sync with aliens will know that. They're the ones that came, and they're the ones that need to be re-educated because they think we're too violent. They're the ones they've seeded. Well, their predecessors seeded a lot of nations, and only 2 out of all the ones that they've seeded are as violent as humanity. At one point, he says, when you picked up a stick, when ancient man picked up a stick, the first thing they did was weaponize it.
Yeah.
And so we dwell on that. But their race, they live for thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands of years, and they don't we only have a short time period on it. It might be it's all about growth more than violence, and we're more friendly than we are violent. I think we just hear about violence a lot more.
Yeah. I've always sort of taken that as a thing for meeting new people is you give people the benefit of the doubt to start with, and then if you need to pull away and retract from it, then you do. But genuinely, most of the time, are reasonably okay.
I hear that would be Anunnaki. They give them the benefit of the doubt, and then as the story goes on, you think, hang on, these aliens might not be as benevolent
as they appear. Yeah, have they got some ulterior motive? Yeah. So, okay, so that's interesting. So, I mean, fantastic books. Then we should probably talk about them a little bit, since they're probably still in the chat somewhere and kind of waiting in the wings to be talked about. Presumably you encountered them through the Elite book, the Tales from the Frontier. So what?
And I said we have this story I'm writing with my brother.
Yeah.
They were keen to see it, but obviously it didn't. It wasn't an automatic. I was going to get published.
So did you have to pitch the synopsis to them, or the first 5 chapters, or what did you do?
I think we were pretty much there. I'd already got it edited in London. There's a good company in London that edits.
Okay.
They had already done a brilliant job, and then we'd already spent another year rewriting it. I think when actually by the time we sent it to Fantastic Books, they said they'd never seen such a finished
a tidy manuscript before.
It's only been finished because we've spent another year editing it.
Right. Okay. So it's quite a well reviewed, drafted novel by that point.
Ready to go. But actually, saying that, they still came back with their editors. And made some brilliant points and sort of a few changes. And, and they was like, I don't think that sounds quite right. And you read it and you think, yeah, you're right. That's why. Okay. That's why you're the publishers.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, my experience of being edited by the Fantastic Books team was very positive. Other than a few, sci-fi things which occasionally they didn't understand. I'd get comments basically, are you sure you mean this? And I'd have to say, yes, it's a thing. Okay then. But in general, I mean, the editing is a fantastic. Using the word fantastic, which is very unimaginative of me, but it's an excellent process to go through, because it really forces you to go back to the essence of your story and go, what am I actually trying to do in this scene, and really tighten things up. Hashtag fantastic from Fantastic Books. There we go. So that's it's a positive experience. But it's interesting that you went and sought your own editor. Did you have aspirations to do anything else with the book before Fantastic Books? Were you thinking of submitting it elsewhere, or was Fantastic Books kind of in your crosshairs because you'd already come across them?
I don't think I'd really thought about it, to be honest. I think that was probably naivety. I think I could have sent it to Fantastic Books, and they would have said everything that the London firm said. When went with the short story that I'd written, that just went straight to print.
Yep.
That didn't even get any edited. It was just, well, this is good to go.
Okay.
So I thought, I need, maybe this new one, I'll have to make sure it's good to go. I'll have to make sure it's good to go again.
Yep.
And in hindsight, I probably wouldn't have had to do that. But I think that's down to any author. I mean, I could send it to friends to get them to edit it, but to give feedback on it. But
yep.
Friends can be really nice, and sometimes
you've got to be a bit careful of that one. Yeah.
Someone that's away from it, and we'll just so it's just somebody that was completely not Fantastic Books, not us, a complete stranger. Here's a book. You read it through for us and let's get an opinion.
Okay.
Someone we don't know.
Yeah. And what's your sort of writing process then? What's the environment where you like to write? I mean, do you need to be locked away in a dark closet or something, or what's your ideal writing environment?
So I do procrastinate. So I'll have to make sure the kitchen is spotless.
Yep.
The room is spotless. Everything's tidied away. My desk is all neated up. Sometimes I'll take my PC apart because it'll need dusting. I'll make sure that's all together again. Lay out the desk nicely.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
All of that. Once all of that's done, then I can sit down and write. But my process for writing a story is to get the beats down, to get the last sentence written, so we know where we're heading.
Right. Okay. So you sort of shape it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. I need to structure it. And when I with the short story and with this story actually, but mainly with that short story for Elite, because I knew the structure of it. I knew there was a fun and games bit. I knew there was the bit where, like in Rocky, where you think they're going to win, and he's getting knocked down. That you have that moment in it.
Yep.
So I knew I had all these moments. So I didn't have to write the story in order.
Okay, so you could write the sections. Yeah.
The fun and games bit of my story on the ship is he tries to fix his magnetic boots and he just makes them worse. So he just leaves one, so he only has one boot that actually works. Because so he's sort of hopping along, but even then there's a plot hole in that, because if he's hopping the gravity, how would he get down? But I think maybe it was powerful enough to get it down.
Plug it back to the surface. Yeah.
I wrote that scene, and then I was like, right, okay, I've got that scene done, and I need to make sure it joins so I can do the beginning scene where his ship still does work, and then I can do the end scene, and I would be able to write scenes as I imagined them, which was a lot easier to do actually, because sometimes you think, oh, that would make a good ending. Okay, I'm going to write the ending. Oh, that'll make a good bit in the middle. Okay, I'll write that bit, without having to get there from the start.
Right. Okay.
And it's a different. I know people write. I think Tolkien said he writes from the beginning, doesn't he? And he writes all the way through, and it was kind of almost making it up as he went along. He had done a load of back.
Yeah, probably more backstory than you ever need, Tolkien, didn't he? But yeah.
But how do you write?
Me, I'm a total plotter. So I sit down and I work out effectively a synopsis, I suppose, a plan for the book. So I know everything that's going to happen, and I've written it out. And my reason for doing that is I find it helps me make a slightly more complicated plot. So if I've got some sort of machinations and shenanigans going on that I want to kind of not in a nasty way, but misdirect the reader a bit to basically say this is the good guy. No, really, it's the good guy, and actually it turns out they're the bad guy, or there's a political thing, and you're not quite sure how it's going to come out. I've basically worked out the nuances in my plot first, and I sit down and go through that for a long, long time until I feel I've worked out all the plot holes and I've made it consistently work. And then when I write, I follow that quite religiously. I will improvise around the dialogue and the descriptions and scenes and what the characters do, and the characters may react to the situation not quite the way I necessarily expected them to, but I've got a thread that runs all the way through from beginning to end. I know who's going to die, who's going to make it, before I start writing properly, if that makes sense. That's how I do it, because I find for the sort of stories that I write, if I don't do that, I write myself into a corner really easily, and I think I can't kill this person now because I need the thing to happen, and I find that I get stuck, and then I have to chuck lots of things in the bin.
If you do plot like that, I think your dialogue, because the scene, your dialogue maybe it's slightly easier to write because your characters would say things that are naturally they would say in that situation, and because that situation is so clear.
Yep.
There's only one thing that they can say, a couple of things that they can say really, and they're not going to go wildly out of character.
No, I don't. I've heard quite a few other people who basically say, "Oh, my character's gone off and done something that's totally not what I wanted them to do." That never happens to me because my characters are, they get told what to do. They do have tendencies to kind of wander off and go, "I'd like to go," then I have to kind of rein them in a bit. But it is. It's they're mostly, I would say, under my control fairly really well. So in terms of characters, so you've got Dash and what was the other one? Will. So are these a bit you and your brother?
Probably.
Or a bit.
Of course, so.
Right.
But apart from the special forces aspect, they probably are me and Simon.
Okay.
And they are. And
hence the banter and stuff.
Yeah. And they are the two heroes, and they're clearly the two heroes. Then you've got the spy, the British. He's the British spy. Is he a goodie? Is he a baddie? We like to. At one point, obviously he's a goodie. I don't know. There's something dodgy about it.
Bit sus going on,
yeah. You need that in there to get that mystery in there. And then you've got the archaeologist, the dad, and his daughter.
Okay.
And the dad he's a proper 1950s B movie. He's out of H.G. Wells.
Right. Okay. Excellent.
Yeah. I know. We've taken from everything. We've just stolen from everybody really, and put it into one book. And he knows about the Anunnaki. He can read the cuneiform, so he's obviously able to tell the heroes and the reader what's going on. If it gets a bit what's going on, you can have that.
There's a little bit of exposition possibility from the guy, to kind of get it out. Yeah.
Without doing an Austin Powers, this is the exposition bit.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. You've got to try to avoid that, obviously, but it's quite useful to have a character who knows a little bit more than the others, who can guide the story along a little bit. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's so. So I mean, do you? Have you? I suppose this is a slightly difficult question. Have you been honest with your? Yeah, if these characters are you and your brother, have you been honest with your own character flaws in the, with the characters? Yeah, they're not presumably hopefully perfect superheroes that they can just resolve everything because they're amazing. Are they flawed individuals?
Dash has the doubt. He's the leader. He's the leader, and he always has that doubt. He always gets the butterflies when he's about to go on a
Right.
mission, and he always thinks he's doing it wrong. Um, I think I still think I'm doing it wrong now. You know,
Yep.
I don't know what it is. It's that I think there's probably a psychological name for it, but yeah, you always think you're doing it wrong, but everybody else around you has total faith in you.
Yeah.
It just makes it worse, doesn't it? And
It's
you know, he's like they're in the spaceship and they're taking off to go to the moon, and he's like, oh my god,
yeah.
what's going on?
What's really scary. Yeah.
Partner is like, that's be fine. But why? Is it because you're in charge? He's like, we're going to the moon. Crying out loud.
It's quite a big deal. Yeah, that's right. We just had Gravity's Arrow join us in the chat. Now, Gravity's Arrow is one of the other authors, I think.
Jack Mann wrote.
Jack Mann. Yes, I was going to say Jack. Yes. Another author. I popped in there. So hello to you, Jack. Good to see you. Thank you very much for popping to the chat. He's saying nice things about Shadewood as well, which is always nice. So since good guys turning into bad guys in the Shadewood series, that only on the second. Well, I'm glad you're enjoying those, Jack. Keep reading. That's good. And he also says Star Protocol is obviously autobiographical. I'm sure the Ramon brothers were in the Special Forces and in space. So clearly, it's very, very convincing. Yeah.
I think it probably is autobiographical in the way we talk to each other.
Yeah.
Although I did keep trying to kill off one of the characters, but my brother wouldn't let me. That was the argument.
Yep.
Because he was very much, this is a fairy tale, you know, they all live happily ever after kind of story. And all the books I've read was kill your main characters, kill them, don't be ready, kill them.
Yep. Yeah, you've got to be a bit. I mean, I can't stand on too much of a pedestal on this one because I have killed a few of my characters over the years, or had them killed for me by events, which is a different story. But George R.R. Martin is probably most famous recently for just brutally killing off people all the time. Somebody quipped to me once. He said, "All you need to do with Game of Thrones is watch the first episode." And then watch the last episode, and anybody who isn't alive in the last episode, who was in the first one, died somewhere in the other series. You don't need to worry about them because they didn't make it, which I suppose is kind of true. You could probably apply that to any book, or any story. But
a story where you'd roll a dice, maybe you'd call the story dice, and you'd have a character, and you know maybe they start the chapter with whatever you wrote, and you roll a dice, and they live. It's because I think Einstein said God would never play dice because it's so random. I just thought, here, roll the dice. You would get too invested. You would cheat it, wouldn't you? It would be like Dungeons and Dragons again. You're like, well, I rolled a D20, but they've got that ability and that ability, so that gives them a
so
plus
maybe that thing is. Yeah, I mean, that's I suppose that's one of the advantages that I have for the plotting is I will decide before I start writing who makes it. So. I won't spoil for those who haven't read Shadewood, but at the ending of Shadewood, not everybody makes it through, right? So, but I knew that right from the beginning before I did book one.
When you know that my character is going to die, do you think that affects the way you write that character? Because characters in Game of Thrones, I mean, I haven't read the books, I've only seen the TV series, but some of the characters are great, and it's so disappointing when they die. When you know that your character is going to die, are you still able to write them great as if they're?
Yeah, I think I can because I tend to write in very much in the present moment, if that makes sense. Yeah. So whilst I know what's going to happen in a year's time, or whatever it is, when I'm writing scenes with the characters in, they're very much alive at that point in time, and they don't know what the future holds. I do as the writer, but as I'm writing the scene, I'm putting myself in their shoes at that moment in time as much as I can. So they feel like people who are alive, if that makes sense.
Have you ever got so invested in a character that you're like, that you think, I wish I wasn't killing them off?
Yeah, I did. I did think very hard, particularly in Shadewood, because I knew it was going to cause a reaction. And it did by the end of book 4, because there's one particular character who does does end up dying, and well, quite a few people die, obviously, across the whole of the series. But one particular character I knew would cause a bit of a stir as a result, and I did think about it, and I thought, no, this is I need this to be the way the story ends, because it isn't. Whilst I'm not trying to be gratuitous with lots and lots of death, which I felt George R. Martin was a bit, I need a significant sacrifice to have been made, and for things not to turn out perfectly, and there to be a bit of bittersweet tragedy in the whole thing, to make the story work, because it's kind of the penance, if you like, for what the whole story is about. So Shadewood really is, I suppose, the conflict between religious ideas and a sort of Renaissance style set of ideas. So the two are kind of in conflict. So you've got one side basically saying there's this whole stuff that we used to be able to do, but we could go do it again. We have the capability to learn. And then there's kind of, I suppose, religious orthodoxy, which is basically saying, no, the ancient texts are what the ancient texts are, and the two worldviews are in conflict. And as a result of that, some of the characters are in the dogma, and that's not their fault that they've been indoctrinated, but they are. And they struggle to break out of that, and that conflict needed some blood, I suppose, to be paid off. And that's kind of what Shadewood is basically about. Is basically, if you're going to have those two worldviews, if they're going to be reconciled, they're only going to be reconciled through some conflict, and that's I suppose, if there is a message in there, that's probably part of it. So there is death, and some of the characters die.
Yeah.
But as I'm writing them, they're very much so. Yeah, so I have. I mean, certainly when I was writing Shadewood, I started dreaming about some of the characters, which I started thinking I'm getting some alarm bells now at this point. Thinking, I think I might be getting a bit too close to this.
I mean, if you believe in the multiverse and infinite universes and how that works, everything you're writing is a true story somewhere.
That's terrifying, isn't it? Some of the things I've done to my characters. If I have those kind of godlike powers in some other multiverse, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a bit worrying. Because and I suppose one of the things I liked about the science and the fantasy is that I can put my characters through some tribulations that are quite exotic, I suppose, compared to stuff that we experience here. I mean, there's horrible things humans do to each other, obviously, on the Earth now, but there are different things in that sort of realm. So the sort of I had one character have a mental breakdown, another one, torture and injury and things like that happen quite a lot as well. Those sort of stuff as well. But there's also subtler things like absolute doubt. Am I the person I think I am? Sort of all that kind of stuff. And having the characters go through those sort of doubts, and then that manifests in their behaviour, that they become uncertain and they falter at key moments, which has impacts on the plot. All those sort of things you can play around with.
Put yourself in the shoes of those characters, can't you? That's
the
My Elite Dangerous story. It was about the guy was stuck on his spaceship for 5 years, but his friend had given him a gun with one bullet.
Well, yeah.
It's called The Easy Way Out. It was saying, he had given it to him in case he'd ever got caught by pirates. And so you don't want to get caught by pirates.
No.
Have the easy way out. And it's all about basically the emptiness of space, the emptiness of his situation and how vast. And obviously, that looming thought of when does he use it? Because his lifetime supply of food is running out as well.
Yep. And I suppose it's face the agonies of choice. Then is it's almost certain that I'm going to die a horrible death. But do I choose the moment of my death? And what happens if I shoot myself too soon? Or when is the pang of hunger bad enough? Or
bigger in his cab, it's just something in the background, and then it's there, it's looming over. This choice,
defining his choice. That's quite good. Okay, so that's interesting. So I suppose as we start wrapping this up, then what's next? You mentioned a possible sequel. Is that in the works at the moment?
We've actually got loads of pages written, but they're all a bit messy at the moment.
Right.
We need to go back and redo them. Then, because the Star Brothers is a self-contained story, but we leave enough little nuggets for a possible sequel, but it wouldn't ruin your enjoyment.
So did you plan for a sequel, or was it kind of things left in there so you could do a sequel, but it didn't matter if you didn't, kind of thing?
I think you plan, don't you? You always plan to write more for these characters, especially when you just enjoy writing.
You've created them, yeah, and had a lot of fun.
I wanted it to be self-contained, because I would hate to read a story and it was too open-ended, and the sequel never got written. But yeah, we're planning, because there's a lot more we can talk about the aliens, the Anunnaki, where did they come from? If the humans are into, where did these guys come from?
Yeah. A lot more you can explore, sure.
Yeah, we delve deep, and we're taking characters out of the Quran. We're going everywhere where we can, and not in a controversial way.
Yeah.
So I've got that. I'm writing this TV pilot with James, who was my old advertising.
Okay, cool.
Partner.
Yep.
And doing this Marshall Bug cartoon, which
see where that goes as well. Yeah.
So it seems to have loads of hits on Instagram more than anything else.
Interesting, yeah. So have you got? I mean, dare we ask? ETA on any of these things, or is it a bit kind of out there?
I think Marshall Bug would probably come first. The pilot, that's the easy part. Is getting it.
Yeah.
Getting the agent. That's the hard part these days. And then the Blood Prince, which I think we're going to call Book 2. It's not around the corner, but it's not a long way off.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
We just need to get together and start plotting it some more. We've had a long time to think about it, but we want more people to read the Star Protocol first.
Yeah, you've got to kind of build up the keep them, and then keep them wanting more. So, just from the chat, Anne-Marie, if you need to post a link, then feel free. We should also, I suppose, put in links. So feel free to put in link to whatever you were talking about. I assume it's one of the other books, well, I'll make sure that there's links to Ramon's book when this video goes up as well. There's also the schedule. So feel free to post the MABLE schedule, which is the list of all the other events that are coming up. So that's quite good. So it's not just obviously this interview. So there's various other bits and pieces there coming as well. So well, that's interesting. So those are the three things that you've kind of got in the works at the moment. Have you got bigger aspirations for I don't know, multi-book projects or anything else in the wings longer term?
I want to write a fantasy story.
Okay.
But that's one I'll be writing myself. Again, it's another project.
Yep.
I think it's further down the line, but I've got this idea for a fantasy story that I think I don't want to make it like the Star Protocol jumps on sci-fi. I don't want to do that with fantasy. You kind of want to do your own thing. And I don't want that own thing just to make elves with short hair. I want it to be cool.
That's a dangerous fantasy, isn't it? It's like you either kind of go with the established, right? There's the elves, the dwarfs, the trolls, or you invent a whole bunch of new things.
I think giant could be giant.
Yep.
Just make them absolutely almost King Kong. Well, not King Kong, but the new King Kong. End up as big as Godzilla. Maybe that's too big. I don't know. I got bits of a story there.
Yeah. This is the ideas are percolating around. Yeah.
Yeah. Two would be the priority.
Yeah.
But yeah, just getting more people to read it, more people to sort of spread the word about it. It will appeal to anybody that likes Flash Gordon.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So I meant when the MABLE. Oops, sorry. Say again.
It sits nicely alongside Shadewood.
Excellent. Yeah. all compatible. Yeah, that's all good. Yep. So that's I mean, I suppose that's one thing I notice with with all of these things is having all the additional ideas that are sort of sitting percolating at the back of your mind, kind of waiting to go. But you kind of got to line them up. in some things. I must admit that I've had, I've done a couple of fantasy books now, but not my own fantasy books. It's probably something that's on my list somewhere in the future to do my own fantasy series, but that's probably quite a long way off at the moment, to the point of being probably a decade away, because I've got too much other stuff I need to do in the meantime. But
yeah, so I was just gonna, I've got your Lords of Midnight on my Kindle at the moment.
Excellent. Yeah.
Start reading. I think I'm on about chapter 3 or 4 now.
That was another fun one, obviously, from another computer game from the 80s, but we'll talk about that another time. So, but that's good. That's good. Well, Ramon, thank you so much for joining me this evening. Thank you for giving us an insight.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's always nice to chat with people, actually. I haven't read Star Protocol yet. It is on my to be read list. I've got a bit of a crazily long list, but I will get that. So that's good.
A lot longer to get through than a TV series, aren't they?
Well, I mean, I must be like 15 books deep still at the moment, and I try and add. I've now got like 3 more because I've been talking to all these authors through MABLE, so it's getting, my to be read list is getting longer rather than shorter, which is not good. But well, it is good because I've got lots of good books to read, but I can't get round to them as fast as I'd like to because I just can't read that fast because I don't have the time. The only time I get to read is just before bed, which isn't ideal. I like reading when I go to sleep, but I don't get very far. If I get a chapter done a night, I'm doing well, it's just not. There's just not enough time.
No.
So
if any listeners have got time to read it, please go out and buy it today.
Yeah, so feel free. I mean, I'm sure Anne's on the case. Chuck the link to Star Protocol in the chat so everyone knows where it is. And it sounds like a fascinating story. So if you basically Flash Gordon but with a modern twist and some excellent banter, that sounds like that's really good. There we go. There's the link in the chat now. So that's fabulous stuff. So Ramon, thank you so much for being my guest. Hope you've enjoyed yourself. Thank you very much for that.
And again, whenever you get a chance.
No problem at all. I mean, these author interviews are proving quite popular, so it's we'll keep going around. And once we've got some new stuff to talk about, we'll have you back and we'll do some more stuff. Fantastic. Just to say thank you to everybody in the chat as well. Thank you for all the questions. Thank you for all the comments. Everyone's looks like they've been enjoying themselves, which is good. Thank you very much, obviously, to Fantastic Books for publishing our books, which is always good. And joining us in the chat this evening as well, and organising the MABLE stuff for promoting not only some of us old hacks and established authors, but some of the new folks who've been publishing books as well, some of which we've got upcoming on future streams as well. So that should be really, really good. But thank you, everybody. Have yourself a fantastic rest of the week. I will see you back on Thursday for some more gaming streams, and we will carry on from there. But look after yourselves, be good, take care of yourselves, and as always, my friends, right on. Thank you very much, guys. Speak to you soon.